It's maybe the biggest misconception is that there is not that one misconception about that NAI. So, well, I mean, what what is AI? What are the misconceptions? I think there are several misconceptions, but they're all very in distinct contexts. And I think the biggest problem is that we're not going too deep when we ask such questions. So I think the biggest problem is that we're kind of caught in extremes when we talk about misconceptions between there's the killer robot scenario where AI is AAI, whatever that is destroying the world. And the other extreme is that NAI is healing cancer or saving the world and, I don't know, saving all of us. I think these are, from my opinion, these are one of the biggest problems is that we're caught in these extremes and we have to try to find this middle ground and get the right or better or more precise conceptions about artificial intelligence. And so I can only answer this from my opinion and from what I do. And for me, one of the most critical questions is the controversial and very critical relationship between the topic of trust and artificial intelligence. So basically in one question, how does trust influence the way we rely or use certain AI-based systems? But there are a bunch of other topics that are of most relevance, obviously. Or the more interesting question is who shouldn't? Well, we have all the classic answers from policy, the tech guys, academia, practice, all these things. I think there are a lot of good frameworks and people who have good ideas about who has to be involved. So I think with the very nature of the problem here being in dispute, like artificial intelligence, I think the most important thing is that we are taking a transdisciplinary approach, which helps to determine which are the most relevant problems and relevant research questions, because we have a wicked problem where there's no fixed solution. And here I think transdisciplinarity and very, very smart stakeholder management is key to solving various problems. And this includes, and I want to point this out, also the people affected. And I think this is one of the only perspectives which has been a little been too much in the background. So also the users, who has been affected by this, not only the people who are also already really smart and knowledgeable about these things. I think it all goes back to uncertainty. Why? I mean, there's so many things happening at such a great pace that most of the people don't have the capacity to follow. And what happens is if we don't have a lot of knowledge, as we're going to a place of uncertainty where there's high risk, where there's not much knowledge, and from a psychological perspective, trust is one of the most, obviously the most important mechanisms, or let's say a coping mechanism to deal with uncertainty. Otherwise, humans would go crazy. Without trust, they couldn't work with each other. There would be no collaboration. We wouldn't be able to invent rockets, go to the moon, etc. But it always needs a good mix. But trust in the ethics context is also very dangerous. It's a very dangerous field. It's a critical field because especially psychology researchers or students have to be very sensitive about what it encounters, because it may also lead to, the question is we have to focus on is how can we build good, accountable, and explainable AI, blah, blah. And trust is actually maybe even counterproductive. So as Joanna Bryson, for example, says, nobody should ever trust AI. And we should only build AI to make it accountable. So I think trust, especially in the context, is a very dangerous topic, actually. And especially psychologists should be trained in ethics in this environment. For example, if you go to the trolley problem, so many people in the past 3 years are asking or have asked me, if you're on the road, who do you have to kill, the child or the grandma, when you have an automated vehicle or an AI car, whatever, if this would ever exist. So, and people still ask these questions, which are not the right questions to ask. Or the question, man versus machine, who's better, who's smarter, who's going to overtake, like these comparing humans and machines. It's just complete nonsense. And it's also a question. And all of those questions lead to mostly one thing, which is fear, which is overblown expectations. And these are just very unproductive, and they don't help for making better discussions, deeper discussions, and more concrete discussions, and really elevate the field and our minds and how we want to cope with these developments. First of all, obviously, we don't really know, or we know bits and pieces, but this is also more an opinion or my personal fear or concern, so to speak. I think what's scaring me most is that these changes in within us as humans are kind of creeping in subconsciously, very subtle. If you go, for example, if you use, for example, if you take the example of social media, I'm very concerned how these algorithms, AI, change our behavior, our attitudes, how they raise radical, how they're built to foster radical opinions, radical groups. So I think the way these technologies change our behaviors, AI or not, is something that concerns me in good and bad ways, but also take, for example, leadership management. How does AI curated or supported decisions, be it in HR or financial decisions, how do they change our leadership behaviors, how we deal with, how we make decisions? How does it influence our decision making on the long term, but also in the short term? We don't know these things. And I think this has great consequences on the way we lead, on the way we build our organizations, and the way we develop. And we don't know how this happens, right? So this is something, how do we deal as supervisors of an AI? I think the diversity crisis is big enough that we probably won't see a change within the next, I don't know, 30 to 40 years, which doesn't mean that we should not do it. So, I mean, obviously, it's just, it will take a long time. I think it will take much longer than we expect. And it's going to be a lot of hard work, which is sometimes frustrating as being the Women in AI ambassador and working in this global NGO, that we're working pretty hard, actually. And there are many hundred women in our NGO that work really hard to make a change, but it can be frustrating to see that nothing's happening, right? Maybe even things are getting worse due to crisis, pandemics, now with the corona crisis. women are hit more. So we don't even know how this also will change the diversity crisis in AI. So, and to the second question, what does it mean to be a woman in tech? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know myself. I haven't had any problems. I have a company that supports me from from the beginning to the end. I think I have the luxury of living that way. But in general, it means what does it mean to work as a woman in a male-dominated field? Well, I think it's challenging, but yeah, it's rewarding, and in the end, it's worth it, right?